You have heard silence before, late at night when everything settles, when the hum of the world fades and you are left alone with your own breathing. Maybe a distant dog barking, maybe the wind brushing against a window, but mostly quiet. You know what silence feels like. Now imagine standing outside, not on Earth, somewhere else. You take a step forward, expecting the same quiet, the same familiar stillness, but instead, the air presses differently. The ground feels wrong, and the sound is not silence at all. It never was. On Earth, sound is simple. It is just vibrations moving through air. Your voice travels at about 343 meters per second, fast enough to feel instant, slow enough that thunder lags behind lightning. You have lived your entire life inside this invisible ocean of moving pressure. You think you understand it, but you only understand Earth's version, because sound depends on the world it moves through. Change the air, and you change reality itself. Change the pressure, the temperature, the chemistry, and suddenly, even something as basic as a whisper becomes something alien. A voice can stretch. A step can echo longer than it should. Even silence can feel loud. And there are places in our solar system where sound behaves in ways your brain is not ready for. Places where the air is thick enough to carry sound like water. Places where it is so thin that sound barely exists at all. Places where the very act of listening becomes unnatural. 3 worlds, 3 surfaces, 3 completely different ways to hear reality. On one, the air is so dense that sound crawls slowly, like it is pushing through a liquid. Your voice would be deeper, heavier, distorted, almost unrecognizable. On another, the air is so thin that even a scream would fade almost instantly. A world where silence is not peaceful, but empty. And on the third, something stranger. A place where the air is thick, but not like Venus. Cold, heavy, rich with methane. A world where sound would travel farther than you expect, but never feel familiar. These are not theories. We have sent machines there. We have listened. On Venus, probes survived just long enough to record the pressure of a crushing sky. On Titan, a robotic explorer descended through orange haze, capturing the sound of another world's wind. On Mars, a rover now listens to dust devils whisper across a frozen desert. And what they heard changes something fundamental. Because when you hear another world, you realize something uncomfortable. Sound is not universal. It is local. It belongs to a planet, which means everything you have ever heard, every voice, every song, every breath, only exists the way it does because of Earth. Take one step away from this planet, and even reality itself begins to sound different. So what does it actually sound like to stand on these worlds? What does it feel like to hear them? And more importantly, what happens when you realize that even silence is not the same everywhere? Start with your own voice. Say something out loud, anything. What you hear is shaped entirely by Earth's atmosphere. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, with just enough density to carry sound clearly. It is balanced, almost perfectly. Now take that same voice to Mars. Mars looks familiar. Rocky ground, mountains, valleys, a sky that almost feels like home, tinted in soft red. But the moment you try to speak, something breaks. The atmosphere on Mars is less than 1% the density of Earth's. Not a little thinner, almost gone. Sound still exists there, but it struggles. It fades quickly. High-pitched sounds disappear faster than low ones because the thin carbon dioxide air absorbs them more easily. If you stood a few meters away from someone on Mars and they spoke normally, You might not hear them at all. Even shouting would feel weak, like your voice is being swallowed. NASA's rover, Perseverance, recorded the first real sounds from Mars. The wind, the crunch of wheels on dust, the faint hum of movement. But everything feels distant, muted, as if the world itself is holding its breath, because it is. Mars cannot carry sound the way Earth does. It cannot hold onto it, and that changes everything. On Earth, sound wraps around you. It fills space. It connects you to your environment. On Mars, that connection is broken. You are isolated, not just visually, but acoustically. It is not just quiet, it is lonely. And then you go somewhere else entirely, to Venus. If Mars is emptiness, Venus is the opposite. Its atmosphere is about 90 times thicker than Earth's. Imagine the pressure of being nearly a kilometer underwater, pressing down on you constantly. The air is not just dense, it is crushing. And sound behaves differently here, because the thicker the medium, the easier it is for sound to travel, but also the slower it moves. On Venus, sound travels at around 300 meters per second near the surface, slightly slower than Earth, but the real difference is how it feels. The air is heavy, thick, almost liquid. If you spoke on Venus, your voice would not sound like yours. The high pressure and dense carbon dioxide would lower the pitch. Everything becomes deeper, slower, distorted. A simple word would feel stretched, unnatural. The Soviet Venera landers that touched Venus did not carry microphones like modern missions, but scientists have reconstructed how sound would behave there using real data. The conclusion is unsettling. You would hear more, but understand less. Sound would travel farther than on Earth. It would wrap around obstacles. It would linger, but clarity would suffer. Everything would feel muffled and warped, like trying to listen underwater. And then there is the heat. Over 460 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. The air is not just dense, it is violent. If you could somehow survive standing there, listening, you would not hear silence. You would hear pressure itself, a constant, suffocating presence, a world that never stops pressing. And then we go farther, beyond Mars, beyond Jupiter, out to Saturn's largest moon, Titan. This is where things become strange in a different way. Titan has a thick atmosphere, about 1.5 times denser than Earth's. But unlike Venus, it is cold, incredibly cold, around minus 180 degrees Celsius. The air is mostly nitrogen, like Earth, but mixed with methane, hydrocarbons, a chemical haze that turns the sky orange. Here, sound travels slower than on Earth, about 200 meters per second. But because the air is dense, it carries well. If you spoke on Titan, your voice would be lower in pitch, softer, but it would travel farther than you expect. Sounds would feel stretched out, calm, almost gentle. The Huygens probe descended onto Titan in 2005. As it fell, it recorded wind moving through this alien atmosphere. When scientists processed the data, they revealed something eerie. The wind sounded familiar, soft, distant, like a quiet day on Earth. But wrong, because nothing around you would match that sound. Rivers of liquid methane, ice that behaves like rock, a sky that never clears. Your ears would tell you one story, your eyes another, and that disconnect would be impossible to ignore. Now step back for a moment. 3 worlds. On Mars, sound dies quickly. A whisper becomes nothing. On Venus, sound is heavy, warped, oppressive. On Titan, sound is slow, calm, but alien. And here is the part that hits harder than it should. None of these are extreme by cosmic standards. these are just 3 nearby worlds, close enough that we have reached them with machines built by human hands, close enough that their winds have been heard. And yet, even here, something as simple as sound changes completely, which raises a question. If something so basic, so fundamental, can be so different just a short distance from Earth, then what else changes? And how much of what you call normal only exists because you have never left this planet? You have never heard the universe. Not really. You have only ever heard Earth. Every sound you know, every voice, every piece of music, every moment of silence has been shaped by this one thin layer of air wrapped around a small planet. It feels universal. It feels absolute. But it is not. On Mars, your voice would fade into nothing, swallowed by a sky too thin to carry it. On Venus, that same voice would bend and sink, dragged down by a crushing atmosphere that refuses to let sound behave the way you expect. On Titan, it would drift, slower, softer, familiar but wrong. 3 places, 3 realities, and none of them sound like home. That is the quiet truth hiding beneath all of this. The universe does not have a single way of being heard. There is no standard, no default. What you experience as normal is just one version of reality, tuned perfectly to the conditions of this planet. Change the air, and you change the world. Change the world, and you change what it means to exist inside it. And suddenly, something small becomes something vast, because if sound can change this much, then so can everything else. Light, temperature, gravity, time even, depending on where you go. The deeper you look, the more you realize that Earth is not just where you live. It is what shaped you, your senses, your expectations, your understanding of what is real. All of it built for this one environment. Take it away, and the universe becomes unfamiliar very quickly. But there is something else here, something quieter. Because even though these worlds are so different, they are still part of the same solar system, still orbiting the same star, still bound by the same physics. The rules do not change, only the outcomes. And that means the universe is not random, it is consistent. But that consistency allows for endless variation, endless ways for reality to unfold, endless ways for something as simple as sound to become something unrecognizable. You could stand on Mars and listen to silence that feels empty. You could stand on Venus and hear pressure itself. You could stand on Titan and hear a wind that almost feels like home, until you remember where you are. And in each place, you would still be you. A human mind trying to make sense of something it was never designed to experience. That is the strange part. Not that these worlds sound different, but that you can imagine them at all. That from one small planet, with one specific kind of air, you can reach out across space and begin to understand places where even silence is not the same. You are not built for those worlds, but you can still hear them. In a way, through machines, through data, through reconstruction, a distant echo of something real. And maybe that is enough, because it reminds you of something easy to forget. The universe is not made for you. It does not need to be. It exists in countless forms, across distances too large to truly understand, under conditions that reshape even the simplest parts of reality. And yet, here you are, on a small planet with the exact right air to carry your voice, listening, speaking, understanding. For now, because one day you might stand somewhere else, somewhere where the air is different, where sound behaves in ways that feel impossible. And in that moment, you will realize something fully. not just as an idea, but as an experience, that everything you have ever known was only one version of the truth, and the universe has many more.